Welcome to the live stream of consciousness. The live stream of consciousness is on a quest to unravel the mysteries of existence. Every episode, we ask the fundamental question, what is consciousness? Is consciousness merely a product of our brains, or does it connect us to something greater? Explore the very fabric of our thoughts. Don't miss a moment. Expand your awareness and tap into the boundless potential that resides within you. Welcome to the live stream of consciousness.
Yes, welcome to the live stream of consciousness. I love Jesse's enthusiasm. I love his voice, but I think I want to change this from being on a quest. I don't think I'm on a quest to find something. I think I'm just on a quest to exist in the moment. And we are in the moment. It is the live stream of consciousness. We have affectionately categorized and labeled this moment Thursday, November 14th. And here you are with me. I thank you so much. And I see Lily out there. I see Grace out there watching on both platforms. Thank you so much. That always reminds me to just do a quick plug in the intro that if you're here live, type something in the comments, type hashtag live. This way I know you're here live. If you're here watching a replay, type hashtag replay so that I know you're watching the replay and that the algorithm knows, really more importantly. I mean, I'm always happy to know that you're watching the show and the people who are showing up. And Hat Powser with my most favorite greeting, Hola, Ascending Fractal Wonders. I love that. I love thinking about the idea of who we are and that whole philosophy of being a fractal aspect of source is, like, I think one of my favorite philosophies to subscribe to, because I think that really talks to all of the different guests that I have and all of the metaphysical modalities and all of these things that, to me, as I was experiencing them, they all resonated with the same vibration. I felt like there was a similarity to them. They all carried the same message, and that message is that we are one. We are all part of one consciousness, and all little pieces of it, the ascending fractal wonders that we are, and we all get to experience it differently. And it's something that's, I find, so beautiful, and it's amazing to be on Earth in America at this moment, because it's like those differences are what seems to be dividing everybody. So this show is on a quest. We are on a quest to connect, to connect everybody, to show everybody how we are connected. And I do that through amazing conversations with amazing guests. And I appreciate everybody out here plugging in to the moment, and giving their energy and attention to it. And don't forget to hit the thumbs up, no matter what color that thumbs up is or pronoun that it might represent. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Hat, for reminding me. So tonight's guest is a returning champion. I love that. And I especially love saying that because I kind of copped that from Alex Ferrari. And my guest has actually been on Alex Ferrari's show. I was amazed. I love watching Alex Ferrari. I'm watching Alex Ferrari's episodes pop up, and all of a sudden, Jacob Cooper on Alex Ferrari pops up. And I was so excited to see somebody who I actually know in person talking to Alex Ferrari. I'm not like a celebrity guy, but Alex Ferrari is like a celebrity to me. What's up, Quiet Healer? Good to see you there. So I am going to welcome back to the show returning champion Jacob Cooper. Welcome to the live stream of consciousness. Welcome back.
So good to be back. I mean, how many years ago was it? Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2
Yeah,
years
you were, I think, on the first season of the show, and I've been doing it for about 3 years, so it's probably 3 years
Wow.
ago.
Yeah, I'm in a new place, same town, but it's nice to see your ascension and all the work that you're doing and reaching, the hearts and minds of so many viewers in this pivotal juncture. And love that intro,
Thank you
pure
so much.
perfection. And you're keeping on the rise, my brother. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's so, I really appreciate that, because you, especially, you've been on the rise. You do a lot of public speaking. You do a lot of events, and I know you said you wanted to talk about some of those things, and we're going to get to that stuff. But like you have 2 books out now. I think when we spoke, you had written, maybe you hadn't released the second one. I don't remember where we were at, but we were actually working together a little bit before that on just kind of promoting your books, and we had gotten to know each other a little. So it's great to still know you're also fighting the good fight, putting
Oh,
out the message, and I can't wait to talk all about it tonight.
yeah, well, thank you. And if viewers are interested, yeah, I have my books here, Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. And those are my two published books and working on more to come. So stay posted.
I just popped up your URL down below so people can access that stuff. And I think there's probably links to Amazon and stuff there where you can buy the books. I think you're probably selling them directly on your site, right? Or is that linked to Amazon?
We do a lot of events, so I love those in-person events. The unfortunate part is my handwriting isn't the greatest, but people feel the heart and when I sign it and the energy, and that's always a highlight of any of my work is signing books and interacting with people.
That's awesome.
Hey, Grace.
That's
Grace
awesome.
is where it all started for me almost, really. She didn't keep her visions to herself. She was, on my work and always a supporter and a believer and someone that I'm indebted to with the work that I do. And I'm sure you feel the same thing about uh,
Absolutely.
Grace. She's
She
she's
Grace
beyond.
is such an amazing energy, and I know you were on her show on public access,
Yeah.
and I was actually on her show. I was on the last episode that she did on public access. I didn't even know that it was going to be the last episode, and that's what kind of started our relationship together, because now I'm kind of producing her show, and I put her on the internet so she didn't have to stop doing what she was doing, and she could keep doing
Wow.
it. We've been having so much fun. It's
From completion, we always begin, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. I definitely cannot complain about the paths that I've been crossed
Oh
with
yeah.
over the last couple of years. For sure. Um, so, but let's get into a little bit. I I I I know I asked you the question, but I always like to rephrase it, or ask it again, pose it again, because I feel like you're never standing in the same river twice, right?
Mm.
You're in a different moment. The answer is going to come through you a little bit differently. Probably the basic beliefs. Listen, there's no wrong answer, but what are we talking about when I say consciousness? When we say consciousness, what is consciousness to you?
I love that, because when everyone asks me something, I could say at this moment, this is how I understand it. But like you said, you asked me this question a couple years down the road, it may be a different answer, right? And we hope it's an evolving answer. But from my understanding, consciousness is the eternal awareness, the eternal observer, the you beyond the you, which, it goes beyond emotion, time, space, physical body. And it's just that awareness of yourself
Hmm.
that's connected beyond the self.
Hmm.
And it's a part of ourselves that is unlimited, is infinite in its awareness, in its connectivity, in its wisdom,
Hmm.
and it's non-fragmented, is how I understand consciousness. But it's the eternal awareness that we are all a part of, that we all
Hmm.
have.
Hmm. Interesting that you say that. I see Raven out there. What's up, Raven? Interesting that you say that it's non-fragmented, because again, I was talking about the philosophy that we actually are those fragments, and I guess it's really semantics, right? We're limited to English language and describing these
Mhm.
concepts. Um, but for me, I like to feel that, and I do hear conversations about this on a lot of the podcasts I listen to, about how we are the universe. Everything that is in the universe is embedded in who we are, like a cell,
Mm.
in a physical body. One cell of a physical body has all the aspects of that physical body.
Mhm.
It's just the cell.
Mm.
um I mean, is that a philosophy that you subscribe to, or?
Yeah, and I think everyone's at a different level of understanding, and everyone might listen to the podcast from a different foundation of awareness.
Of course.
But to break it down in terms of finite linear terms, and we're all just artists of this stuff. We have this beautiful awareness and this concept. We're all just trying to draw it out with language, that's limited, but it's our biggest tool. You'll take myself in this chair. I could see myself in this chair, and you could say, point to Jacob, and I say, right here,
Mhm,
I'm in this
mhm,
chair, but
mhm,
I'm also in a room. I'm also in a house. I'm also on
mhm,
an ocean, on an island, in
mhm.
Long Island, rather, not a island,
Right.
in New York, in the US,
Sure.
on the earth, circumferencing the sun. So, on a physical basis, if we have a sense of limitations with how we see the physical, could you only imagine how also limited we are with
Mhm,
some of those unseen forces that don't meet the physical eye? And so we are not what we think, even on a physical basis. And that invites people to open up avenues to maybe see that we're a part of a greater collective than maybe we're a part of. But yeah, we walk around fragments, and that's a part of the ego. And that's where a lot of spiritual transformation occurs, is the
sure.
death of the ego, the rebirth of the spirit, because we walk around with our names, our bodies, and two things could be true at the same time. Well, yes, technically, all those stories are true,
Right.
but it's not the entire book. It's just maybe a
Right.
page, a chapter, and it's a part of a greater story.
Absolutely.
Um, you know?
And I love that analogy, actually, that kind of visual that you were describing, right? That you, here you are, you're Jacob, you're sitting on a chair in a room, in a house, on a street, you're backing out of this picture, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is a perfect analogy for a very difficult concept to understand, is that we are all one, right? Like, there's
Mm,
no separation between you and I, and how is that even possible? But if
mhm,
you back out far enough and you're looking at the picture,
mhm.
we're part of that picture. We're a part of that. We are connected to that
Yeah.
picture. We're all one. I think that's a good way to kind of break down that concept and understand it on a human level, because it's so difficult to understand. The idea, when I hear people talking about the idea that there is no separation, like, I am you, you are me, right? Those kinds of things, because of our experience and the limitations of our physical experience, it's really hard to wrap our head around it,
Mhm.
you
Oh,
know.
yeah, yeah, and it could be scary. It could be a little bit of a bug out. But that's really where spiritual expansion starts. It begins by spiritual exploration, the daringness to stretch the bandwidth of how you see reality, the
Mhm.
courageousness to go about that voyage. That's how we were able to find the world that we're in, through exploration. And same thing within our own concepts of reality, pushing those bounds and, making sure we're coming out of a place that goes beyond the senses so that we could see more. I always give that analogy. It's like I'm on a first floor of an apartment, I'll see some stuff. Put me on the 10th or 15th floor, I'll see more. Um, so we could really understand this stuff from just the physical,
Mhm.
and if you're able to do that, that's a great reference to spirituality. Maybe I'm Taurian, I'm an earth energy, so I try to tangibilize all these things, but I think that's of value, for people to really see that how we see reality just on a pure physical basis is way off based, and very limited. And so
Right.
imagine that door of possibility for other things that we're not currently privy to in this moment.
Totally, totally, and that's what I've been. Raven is giving a shout out to the Taurus. That's what I've been really loving, the idea of, and opening the idea of, to that individuality. Like, everybody perceives things differently, right? Like you said, you're there, you are sitting in a room.
Mhm.
Here I am sitting in a room. At Pauser is getting the team together for Team Taurus, rallying Team
Love
Taurus
it.
together. um, but you know and we've created language, and we've created kind of these concepts, like the idea of this moment being Thursday, November 14th. I was kind of pointing that out, right? Like, we've created these concepts so that we can all relate to each other. But, like, for me, I see behind myself these lights that are blue and pink, and you may describe it the same way, but you may not be
Mm.
seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. You know, you
Yeah.
might be perceiving it differently, and we've created this set of communications where we can all agree on things and experience it the same way in the physical realm. But things go way beyond that, and that's kind of what you're saying. It's like we're you know, there's so much beyond the physical, and let's actually get to that. Let me jump into that,
Mhm,
because you are a near death experiencer. You had a near death experience,
mhm.
um and that brought you to where you are today. I don't want to, again, we talked about this, I don't want to like go through the whole story
Mhm.
necessarily, because I'm sure people, especially my viewers, have heard the stories, but let's hear your specific, how your stories came, when you had your experience and all that, and just kind of a brief to where you're at now. And then we'll get into kind of the
Yeah.
meat of the conversation I was talking about earlier, spirituality and the current state of humanity.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, those lights behind you, I perceive them as mystical, beautiful, sexy, if you call it, but that's
Oh,
also you too.
thank you, thank
So
you.
I love the background and the whole ambiance. It makes me relax, I'm sure viewers as well, and in a
That's
good zone.
awesome.
So there's a method to the madness, right? But the near-death experience phenomenon, to me, is just really a death of the ego and a rebirth of the spirit. In a sense that you recognize you're not your name, your gender, your body, your age. You're
Mhm,
experiencing all these things, but
mhm,
there's a you beyond the you as you perceive yourself. There is a reality beyond the reality that we think that's all that there is. And, I had mine right here in Long Island, on Long Island. I always get those mixed up, in, on, but you get the point. I'll never understand it no matter how many times you explain it to me. I'll still confuse in
it's
and on.
semantics, I
Um,
understand it either way.
yeah, you get the spiel, but I went to a playground completely suffocated as a result of pertussis. All parts of my body, including my brain, were completely deprived of life force in the physical, oxygen, and everything was cut off. And as a result, my brain literally cracked in half, snapped in half, and that's when the spirit realm totally presented itself on the other side, and it was just a full-blown crossing over experience. And this included, like you see, angels behind me. They're still to the right and left of me, my spirit guides, but yes, encounters with spirit guides, or some called guardian angels. You want to say UK, you want to say Great Britain, it's the same thing. Um,
Yeah.
Awareness of previous lifetimes, premonitions of the work that I would be doing,
Wow.
encounters with soul family, hundreds, thousands of angels around me, and more. So it just kind of like popped the hood of things that were always there,
Mm,
that for many reasons we're not always, privy to. Otherwise, we would have a heaven experience and not an earth experience. I think we're here as spiritual beings to have the physical human experience.
mhm,
Near death experiences are the great reminders for people along the path to remind themselves that they just didn't fall out of a coconut tree. They came from somewhere. They're
mhm, mhm.
connected to somewhere, and there's a greater intelligence, intention, and purpose behind this life that goes beyond the material obligations and path and need.
Right. So almost like, and I'm just kind of feeling this out, right? Almost like you given a mission, right? Or not, you were given your mission, you were reminded of your mission, it seems like, right? Almost.
Yes, but also the near death experience was a very, I certainly speak about this in my books, but what people misunderstand about near death experiences is they want them. There's a degree of envy of them. And what I do have to say, be careful for what you wish for.
Mhm,
There's a double-edged sword phenomenon of them.
mhm,
There's a great deal of trauma, which ended up being a blessing as to why I'm able to remember this
mhm,
after experiencing it at such a young age. Um, also led a doorway to empathy, But I do understand that all of our life experiences has a purpose once we release it. When we're holding on to things that's painful, no matter how good it is,
Mhm,
we come here to have that impact, to have that release. And I think so many people are suffering because they're eternal beings and they're suffocating that eternal joy, that eternal light. They're not feeling it and they're not impacting it on others. And that's kind of was the tumultuous experience that I had with my NDE. Once
mhm,
I release that, I
mhm,
recognize that life isn't about me. It's
mhm,
about the ripple effect and
mhm,
having an ability to let go of the things that you were meant to.
mhm,
Um, we're here as our brothers and sisters keeper. I had my NDE in a playground,
mhm,
and you think of a playground. I was a child, and we're all just children in the playground of God. To make this world a better place, to look out for each other.
mhm,
Sadly, and we'll get into this, there's a lot of different spectrums on that truth that I experienced.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. So again, you're talking to me and there are thoughts going through my head. So I want to try to get them out and see if they're significant, um, about, about the human experience, right? About, in the spiritual community, in the different philosophies, the human experience is like a very coveted experience, right? Spiritual essences want to come, they sign up to come to earth, right? Suppose, and again, this is a philosophy that I subscribe to, but to come to earth to have that experience, right? And I feel like, from what I've heard, right, because I haven't been on the other side, I feel like on the other side, joy and grief are the same. Like they're intense feelings, and I feel like that's like, almost like I was going to say, this experience as a human experience actually is heaven, because that gives the ability to that essence of source to have those experiences of great joy and great pain.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Well, I love what you said, and I think in a way we're all just the collection of God's stories in all of our lives. And we're just the
Mhm,
experiences
mhm,
of the divine, and we experience life, through the divine. That's
mhm,
we're all here. We're all aspects of the divinity, and all of our lives experiences, are the stories of God. And
mhm.
that's the way that I certainly see it. But yes, grief and joy in this life could be on the same page too. I would say
Yeah.
grief and love. When there's great love, there's a lot of grief that we have.
Mhm, mhm,
There's great loss that we feel.
mhm.
Um, and grief could be a beautiful thing.
Right.
There's a natural order in all things. There's been hundreds of thousands of losses that have come before us, and we have an intrinsic hardwiring to process those losses
Mhm,
that's able
mhm,
to transcend our greatest pain to our greatest transformative meaning within time. Now, I think there's oppositional forces at hand within society that predicates trendiness and
mhm.
focuses on the sexy, or just like what's next. And there's a great degree of bypassing the natural order of things.
Mhm.
You would think with more mental health awareness that wouldn't be, but um, but I think with when people are able to be aware that not all this work is easy or sexy, but it's meaningful, and to trust the process at
Sure.
every level. Trusting the process is important, and that was the foremost um, prominent equation of Albert Einstein, just in terms of the governance of our life. Is the universe an ambivalent, loving, or place that works against us? And once you're able to really have a determination of that factor, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily change the things that maybe are thrown in your path, but you're able to navigate those things because you have trust, you have
Well, I
that
think,
awareness.
yeah, and I think that that's a part of also kind of what I'm saying, right? Because if I think about some of the spiritual people that I know that are some of the most loving, you know, aware people, of love and essence of love, but got there through very traumatic experiences,
Mhm.
right? Abuse, or just some traumatic experience. And so they've kind of, you're talking about spectrum also, right? They've experienced this side of the spectrum, so they kind of know this side of the spectrum, and that's where they want to be.
Mm.
And that's where they go, and that's where they end up, even after experiencing that grief. I'm again, I don't mean to go on a tangent. I just kind of, I'm processing these ideas in my head
Mhm.
about the human experience, from the perspective of source. um
Yeah, and it's funny though, and I'm sure Grace would agree with us that sometimes we associate heaven with the place outside of us, but yes, obviously having a near-death experience, I've really come to the understanding or the knowing that heaven is us inside of us.
mhm,
We're not
mhm.
here necessarily to create heaven on earth. We are heaven on earth. Remember that we are already there.
Yeah,
If each person does that, we all are that light that could light up, any darkness that's thrown our way. But I just certainly believe that this is the heaven for those who have crossed over. The lives that we live are what loved ones looked at as their heaven. They're connected to us and
that's
what
what
we
I was
do,
talking about.
and
Yeah.
so there's that um, paradoxical approach. And one of my friends, colleagues actually, who endorsed my second book, Alison Dubois, has a book called "We Are Their Heaven," and
Mm.
I always love that title of her book because
It's so great. I love it.
it
Heaven is real.
summarizes, to a degree, the eternal connectivity and how we're not separate and how we look at them as a part of heaven, but they look us at us as a part of their heaven. So,
Right, right.
we're all
I
intertwined
love
here.
that so much. That's such an amazing, just an amazing statement on perspective, and
Yeah.
how perspective can really change things, and how important it is, perspective. Wow,
Yeah. Change the
interesting.
way you look at things, the things you look at change. I always, that's a Wayne Dyer quote that I live by. And yeah, you know, it's funny, and we'll get into this, but obviously I think the important thing is to not judge ourselves, because sometimes we'll associate spirituality with perfectionism or people who are better than us. I think we all are spiritual. We all have
Mhm,
that part of ourselves, but we all also are human too, and we have our raw
mhm,
moments. I mean, just the
mhm.
last couple of days, I was going through my own very human moments, and but it's I think for listeners, you're gonna have your human moments, but through awareness, the pivot's a lot easier. You
Yes,
know,
you're aware that they're
and
the human moments. You're
you're
like,
you're
oh,
kind of
okay.
aware. We're like, all right, and let's kind of get back. And so through that mindfulness practice, there's awareness. You could have moments where you're able to do that pivot and get back in equanimity, centeredness, and to not judge your human side, because we all are here to experience that, but we're also here to work through that and evolve from that, from those
Totally.
pieces.
Totally, absolutely, and I've said a couple of times in the last couple of days in different conversations about where I'm at my in my moments, right, on Earth, my years of living, and just being like, wow, I don't think I've ever been more um aware of who I am, and because of the awareness of who I am, I'm that much more comfortable with
Mm,
who I am, and that much more happy with who I am, and grateful
yeah,
to be who I am. I've been just thinking, like, you know what? I'm so happy that I'm me, because I'm not that other person, right? And all the situations that, if you're ever in a situation where you're not happy, that's what I always do. I'm like, oh
right.
man, thank God I'm not that person, like going through life that way, you
But
know,
yeah, it's yeah. Well, I like what Wayne Dyer
trying not to
said.
judge at the same time.
Yeah, well, Wayne Dyer once said, "If you like the person that you're living with, you can never really be alone." And
Exactly.
does it like not necessarily like someone you're living with, but in terms of yourself, that you'll always be feel a connection. Um, then if you knew who was around you, you never feel alone either. So,
Right. I
but
love
it's
that.
it's remarkable where so many people have escapism and they want to go to all these exotic places, and I think that's great. But the most exotic place that you go to is not such a foreign place. It's right within, and when you're connected, everything else magnifies. Like I've had moments where, all checked in
Mhm.
and I was listening to music, and I swear, I felt like I had like a bong in my mouth and I was getting high from that song. And I was just connected. And other times when I could have the greatest song ever and I'm not connected, nothing really moves me. So
Right.
people have to live from the inside out versus the outside in. And that's when I think you'll really find this world becoming like a whole new planet that you
Yeah,
see.
totally.
It
And then,
feels totally different.
and that moment is okay when you're listening to the song and you're like, hey, wait, why I'm not feeling that way? It's okay. It's not meant to be in that moment, right? Each
Right. You
moment
know,
is meant to be different.
you can't, it's like we have spectrums of feelings and
Yeah.
they're there for their reason, their season. Um, you can't have climactical moments every second of the day, but
Mhm.
that's that duality,
Right.
and getting closer to the light further, and it's just a journey back forth.
Totally. Totally. Well, so I was I apologize to anybody who came to the show because I did say near death experience, and we love that part of you, but
Mm,
the other part of you I also love is just your connectedness to source and your own beliefs and who you are because of that experience.
mm,
And let's just call that spirituality, right?
mm.
For time's sake and
Right.
language's sake and agreeing
Yeah.
agreeing on it. um I told you I wanted to talk about spirituality in this moment, right? In this
Mm,
moment of humanity that's happening, because
mm,
I think there are so many things happening around us, outside of us. And we've already talked about how really the inside is what's important and where you connect to what's happening. But what do you, I guess the question I want to ask is, hmm, I should have written it down when we were talking about it. But I guess so. So for me, I'm noticing, obviously, with this show and shows like it and these conversations becoming the
mm,
norm, right? I kind of I don't feel like, oh, it's so special what we're doing, even though it is. It's great, but it's becoming the norm and it's becoming
mm,
accepted. So what I wanted to talk about was like the importance of that, the importance of the idea that people are becoming more in touch
mm,
with their psychic abilities. More people are having near death experiences. More people are exploring plant medicine and ayahuasca as a way to connect with
mm,
source. But more people are looking for that connection with source, where I think for many, many years, we have been, and this is again my opinion, we have been separated from those
mm,
ideas. We've been kind of like led down these paths of blinders and like, nope, you're going to get a job, you're going to work, you're going to pay taxes.
mm.
We've been put into this system. But spirituality seems to be kind of showing everybody that there's something
Mm.
outside of that. um,
Yeah.
so let's talk about that, because you, like I said, you speak around the country,
Mm.
in all different places. And you talk about you tell your story. How are people responding to that, and what do you think the significance is? I guess let's
Yeah. Well,
call that the question.
spirituality has always been the global algorithm, but I think people are now starting to get on that algorithm and it's starting to intensify. And I
Mm,
mean, you want to talk YouTube specifically, I mean, it's starting to click. I think there's an associative component of information, beliefs, behavior. You saw that, not to go down that rabbit hole, but last week where
mhm.
um,
Absolutely.
informa- information influences beliefs and influences behavioral decisions.
Mhm.
And I think right now there's a much wider network of all types of information, and including spirituality. And I think really the internet and social media is a great metric of our own inner algorithm and kind of what's going on. And we'll be able
Nice.
to kind of placate and provide a mirror as to what we're drawn to. And it's just kind of like this mirror of our universe that we have on a conscious level. Subconsciously we're all connected, but consciously. And so I think and I love that, be in this world but not of this world. Yeah, I do love that quote. That's a great mystic quote. um so I think right now the access in that umbrella is increasing,
Mhm.
and when information is more accessible, that could allow people more empowerment, more beliefs, and also to kind of get on this kind of inner search and for the internet to be used in a positive way. Like anything else, is a great duality. Internets and technology and social media are the
Yeah.
greatest forces that we have on hand. And when that's going in the right way, wow, what a
Yeah.
unifier. You mentioned shows like Alex Ferrari that was on, and a bunch of other shows. Those types of shows are reaching the masses. And
As well as your
why
show. You have a show. Plug that right now.
Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, one of
It's
my shows.
amazing. You have some great
We're
guests.
on YouTube and mindbodyspirit.fm. You could check that out for interviews. But I think you know there's always a dichotomy of the why and the how and the what, and I just have to ask myself why, particularly at this juncture, is that exploding? I mean, did the chicken come before the egg? Whatever. I think
Right.
obviously the explosion of accessibility had this. I also think great pioneers who are able to utilize their own professional licensures and put those on the line to add credibility and scientific validation, provided safety and openness for people to come into it, that this wasn't just someone smoking dope in the Woodstock area, or um, I don't know, someone just going to like some ashram in India. This was something that people in the highest, most power-ended, positions can do. I mean, I was just listening to the biography of a yogi and Yogananda,
Mm,
and Steve Jobs, one of the most successful entrepreneurs, Apple founder, I believe, at his funeral gave copies of the autobiography of Yogananda,
mhm,
one of the greatest mystics on American soil, from
mhm,
India, and just was so far beyond, his time and his years, and the information that he brought. It's just amazing. I mean, I was listening to his speeches from like the 1920s or 30s, whatever,
mhm.
and the stuff that he was saying then is ahead of its time now.
Right.
Seeing
Right.
people like dressed up in their old kind of tuxedos and listening to this Indian guy talk about consciousness and
Yeah.
all this stuff, and I was like, is this talk happening right now? Because this seems 2024, not
Right.
1920s or whatever. But I think people are understanding needs. That needs go beyond the physical. That we have spiritual, needs, and
Mm,
there's a certain degree of religion where it got people to a certain point, but they had more of a hunger, more of a thirst, and they're starting to live a more empowered life, which is a connected life, and understanding what our soul really wants, desires, needs in this life. And it needs good information. It needs to be connected. It's not here to be deprived or put down, but here to be risen up, expanded in a full range of motion in this reality.
yeah. Yeah. I agree with that philosophy. And I do believe that in the ultimate purpose of us to be here is to experience joy, even
Mhm.
though, again, for some people, it takes experiencing the pain to get to that. But I do feel like that's our ultimate purpose of being here, and being connected. Angelo is asking an odd question. Do you feel like most spiritual people are dog lovers?
Well, I think dogs love people who are most spiritual.
Ah, that's
No, no.
good.
It's like,
Dogs can sense it. Sure, yeah,
there's a
yeah.
funny story. There was a man, a Jewish rabbi. I don't know, people probably wouldn't know him, but he was like a very famous performer of very high vibrational frequency. And there was this dog that would growl and bark at every person that he
Uh-huh.
came into sight with. Had a lot of abuse and was kind of like this rescue dog.
Mhm.
And this man who performed with Nina Simone, he was a great famous Jewish musician,
Yeah.
big rabbi, comes to the house. The dog doesn't do a thing. It's just calm and stays
Wow.
there. It shows you, dogs pick up on vibes. They pick up on
Sure.
energy.
Oh,
Now,
a
don't
million.
take that personally if a dog is growling at you. You might
Right,
have
right. They're
transference with,
ultra sensitive. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
but
but
absolutely no, a million percent. Energy, listen, energy is the universal uh
language. Yeah.
currency, right? The language, exactly. Hat Pauser is saying exactly in the world, but not of it, kind of like Sasquatch. Interesting, because I've heard a few references to Sasquatch lately.
Is that like
And
Bigfoot in a way, or all that
yes,
stuff?
Sasquatch is like Bigfoot, right? And
Yeah.
um, and
Sounds
I've
like
been
what's that guy? he has like the unexplained. William Shatner has like some of these unexplained mysteries, unsolved
Oh yeah,
mysteries.
yeah.
Sounds like one of his episodes that he would
Well,
have. Yeah.
it's interesting. So I don't know if this is going on a tangent. It probably is. But I recently, maybe a couple of months ago, had an experience that I would call was a download.
Hmm.
A bunch of information just came into my head and realizations about things, and I'm still kind of confused and processing it. But basically, the message that I got was that reality lies in imagination.
Oh,
And
sure.
what that means is, like, I feel like reality is in the thought realm. So where our
Mm.
brain is processing and whatever's happening wherever that is, that's actually reality. And this physical aspect is just a manifestation of, okay, I'm gonna put you here, here's your character in the game,
Oh, yeah.
um and
I
and
love that. Well, everything in reality was once a thought or an imagination.
yeah,
Everything.
absolutely. So with that, and these are that went along with thoughts that I've had my whole life, right? Which was that, I think that anything that humans imagine, right? Movies, right? The
Mhm.
Transformers, Godzilla, these things that they're imagining, just by the fact that they've imagined them and they thought of them, they've created them. They exist in the universe.
Mhm.
Maybe not as physical as we see them, but in some realm and in some aspect of that
Mhm.
thought, there is a manifestation of that concept.
Yeah,
um
sure.
which is super exciting and super frightening all at the same time, to think that all of these things actually exist, right?
Mhm.
um and and the idea that you see, and I've seen this over the years, different channelers, right, who channel fairies and dragons and light language, that's fairy language and dragon language. Like, I'm just so amazed, and I'm like super excited that all of these things are happening
Right.
and starting to be accepted. The biggest thing for me, and I tell this to Janice, my girlfriend, all the time, is like, I cannot deny other people of their experience. If somebody's telling me that they're on the Galactic Council, who am I to tell them that they're not, or say that they're crazy, right? And listen, maybe I'll talk to that person again, maybe I won't, but there are certainly people who tell me things like that
Mhm.
that I resonate with, and I'm like, I hear that. I get it. I believe
Right.
it. And your story is probably more common and not as far out there as being on
Mhm.
the Galactic Council, or some of those other stories. But I'm super excited, and I think that that's really kind of what I wanted to talk about, right? This moment of humanity that we're living in.
Mhm.
There's different factions of things going on. There is certainly a spiritual movement, people that you hang out with and I hang out with, and the community
Mhm.
that we like to be around. But there's also people who are kind of still subscribed to old paradigms and the
Mhm.
politics of the day, that just everything that's happening in the country. It's very obvious people how by what people are talking about, that how concerned they are, and the significance that it has to them,
Mhm.
and to their existence. Can you speak to that a little bit, as far as like, is that a part of this shift and this split in perception?
Yeah, I think we have to allow ourselves to be in the awareness that two things could be true at the same time, that we could have our raw emotional reactions and real human reactions to things, but through that spiritual awareness, we're able to navigate those things. And I think the spiritual practice is not regarding the abandonment of our pain or our feelings. It's the capacity to work through
Mhm,
all those things, but
mhm,
not to be identified by any of those things as our full self, but rather things that we're experiencing that on one hand are very real. With spiritual awareness, we recognize though that it's kind of like we're driving on a road. There's a bump on this road, but
mhm,
recognize this road is endless. And eventually we'll find our rhythm, we'll find our
mhm.
flow. It may not happen tomorrow, in a month, but eventually we'll get back on course. And we're always
Right.
going to be on this path, no matter what is thrown our way. So it could be a great reference for resilience and the capacity to have that reset.
Mhm.
And, I think it's important to be honest. Like we have, very justifiable reactions to things on one hand. But on the other hand, we have to decide, is that maladaptive? If I sit
Mhm.
there for that, duration, whatever that is, on my pathway. So I always say, I always like that saying, like you can complain all you want about something, but what is that going to do? It's
Right.
about action. And
Mhm.
where do you come from? Is that action, unifying, or are you hurt? So then you're going to be a hurt person who hurts more people.
Mhm.
So we have to really, address, what we're going through,
Mhm.
but not lose sight of what this is all about.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of people are upset, more importantly, because a lot of what's going on and divisiveness just goes against our core phyla,
Mhm.
our true nature. And I think that's what's pissing people off on a deeper level, more so than others.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, yes, be upset, allow yourself to be upset, but generate the hope, the faith, and the change through what you're going through. Do something about it. Make a change. Look within and recognize if I don't like something, I could have opposite action. An opposite response towards those things that I don't like. Otherwise, if I regurgitate those things, that battle has won. I
Mhm.
am I'm becoming the things that I don't like,
Right.
so to
Right.
speak.
And yeah, and I think people are starting to realize that.
Mhm.
I think the world needs a big mirror to be held up to everybody. Everybody's got to kind of look in the mirror. Um, you know, uh, Pauser says actually, there's been a theory that Sasquatch is interdimensional, with many reports of it dematerializing. This may be vibrationally aligned, primarily elsewhere, and able to navigate between. That's actually, I think, part of what I heard. We may have been watching the same podcast. Um, but that brings up a good point, and tell me what you think about this. And this is something that also kind of came to me just in a thought, in just a way to, sometimes I think thoughts come to me just as a way to respond to what's going on around me, right, and respond to the things that I'm experiencing. And I guess what I'm going to ask you is the idea of Sasquatch, the idea of ETs, the idea of angels, the idea that all of these experiences are somehow linked and based on the person who's experiencing them, and how they perceive it is based on how they are ready to receive those experiences.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a magneticism in all walks of life. For instance, obviously the law of attractions, but your vibe attracts your tribe.
Mhm.
And that goes on this realm and that goes beyond this realm. And so I think in a way, people magnetize these certain entities or beings, just based on their energy, their soul energy. Some people ascribe to the belief that people are angelic souls, intergalactical, based souls, or
Mhm.
earth-based souls.
Mhm.
And so I think, yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I think we all have oneness does not mean sameness, and I think it's kind of like a peace version of the military, where some people are in the Navy, some people in the Army, Air Force, and we're all here like differently wired with a different purpose, with all the same components at the end of the day. If
Mhm.
we're all here to do the same tasks, nothing would get done. We all have a variety of notes to implore, in the universe. That makes it a more harmonious experience when they're all singing, hopefully, within unison.
Mhm.
But I certainly believe that there's a lot going on because there's a readiness. I think when the students are ready, the teachers are appearing, and it could be that the universe sees a readiness for all these things to be put out there. Now, how we handle that information is important. Is it
Yeah,
to pump
absolutely.
up our ego, or is it to unify us? Do we react in fear, or do we react in love and acceptance?
Right.
We do that, for instance, with people who are different than ourselves.
Mhm.
If it's not in our own box, some people could just other it and diss it and put it down. Maybe
Mhm.
there's an intimidation, and then others could look at it with curiosity
Mhm.
and empathy and loving, eyes. So that's my
Right.
hope with all these things that may be put into more the forefront on a mainstream level.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, and for me, as much as there was kind of this energetic um feeling surrounding all of the politics stuff that was kind of,
Mhm,
it was like little, I don't want to say triggering, but it's a very intense energy.
mhm.
Um, but really for me, and this made me happy, in the end, all I felt was compassion, or all I feel at the moment is compassion, right? For all of the people who are fearing right now, living in fear of, oh my God, this and that's going to happen. It's like, just even knowing about what the moment is, right? They're just making conjecture about something that, that's going to happen. The future doesn't exist. Only the moment exists, right? And they can make that moment whatever they want, but they're choosing to kind of subscribe to a moment that they're being sold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the compassion piece that I try to lean into is, this is a shakeup period in life,
Mhm,
much like the pandemic was.
mhm,
Everyone has their own, kind of prior life experiences, cumulative advantages or disadvantages within anything that may come in their path that may make it more difficult. It may be storms. Everyone's in a unique boat. And so I think everyone has a right to process it how they do.
of
But I
course.
think between a lot of that, might be unsettling worry, fear,
Mhm,
anxiety, trauma that's kicked up, grief that's kicked up.
mhm.
And so, I think we have to meet it not as much on a behavioral level, but more on a feeling and intellectual thought level that,
Mhm.
it's like if we have a friend, they're acting out, but it's like right behind that is a very frightened person potentially, or someone who, might have trauma, reoccurring itself. And so everyone responds to life in such a plethora of avenues.
Mhm.
And, I think just lead with empathy, lead with compassion. It doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with it, but, everyone
Yeah,
comes from their own place. And I think if, sometimes we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And, uh, I think just
yeah, I
validating
love that.
people.
I love that.
Um, I once gave a therapy session where I didn't say one word, and the client's like, "Jacob, that's the best session I've ever had." And I'm like, "Yeah, people want to be heard. They
That's
want to be
awesome.
listened
I
to."
love that. I love that.
They, especially when you're in pain, we've all been there. And just
Yeah,
imagine yourself like through their lens, and I'm sure
yeah,
we've
yeah.
all felt pain. Like, what do you want? You feel like you're drowning. You want someone to hold on to. You just want someone to be there for you. You want a hug. You want love. It doesn't mean that that we made it agree or disagree. But when there's pain, there needs to be empathy.
Absolutely.
That we
No,
need to have.
I love what you said, and it made me realize that's one of the things that kind of, I think, draws me to you, and why I like you so much is, people have told me often I miss my calling as a therapist, right? And just the idea of what you said, where you had a session where you didn't say anything, I can imagine myself doing that, because intuitively that person needed to talk. They
Mhm.
needed to tell you everything that they were,
Oh
and
yeah,
they needed you to listen, and you gave them exactly what they needed, and that's amazing. That's so intuitive and energetic. It's such
yeah.
a brilliant energetic exchange. We talk about energy here all the time. I just want to back up a little bit, when we were talking about people people perceiving things the way they're ready to. Will said it's really about what program you're buying into, and your focus makes it real. And I agree with that. And then I love this, the chat room. Will says we're moving on up. I guess he's talking about we're ascending, where consciousness is, we're moving on up. Angelo says to a deluxe apartment in the sky. And Grace responds with, we finally got a piece of the pie. We've got the chat room singing the theme song for Good Times. That is hysterical. I just
It's
want to,
funny, I connected to that Curtis Mayfield song, "Move On Up," but,
oh,
I don't know if
nice.
you're familiar, that's a hit. But,
Very,
yeah, it's funny, Grace mentions pie, obviously, Thanksgiving coming up, trying to cut down a little bit, but, I'll enjoy myself during that time. But, we all sometimes in spirituality, we think of like, "Alright, this guy's got a big ass slice of the pie, and there's not enough to go around." When it comes to spirituality, there's an infinite pie. We all have a slice of it because we all are, you know, the
mhm,
pie. We're the collective pie, and it's not
mhm,
about um, scarcity or fighting for terrain, or like someone,
Totally.
it's the better that person is, the better we all are. High tides rises all boats. So that's what it's all
And
about.
it's all what we're talking about. All this last couple of minutes has been all about compassion, and I love that. I'm playing music in a band again, and one of the songs there's a line that says, "I'm just a beggar, and I found some bread, and I want to share mine with you." And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the idea of knowing what it's like to be a beggar and having some bread and just
Mm,
wanting to share it. That's just
yeah.
like such love and compassion and humanity. And then Hat Powser says people get very attached to their ego identity as a victim and will do just anything about anything to hold on to it. I agree, and that's kind of back to mental health and kind of
Mhm.
society and the way the way things are presented and ideas and people. Yes, I. How many people do we all know that that's becomes their identity, right? Their
Mhm.
trauma becomes their identity. And how do you let go of something
Right.
when you make it your identity? You can't let go of it.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, there's a story in life that could define us, but within a lot of trauma work, it has a lot to do with narrative therapy, which is owning your story and being the hero of your story. You could be the victim of the
Mhm.
story or the victor.
Oh, I love that.
And through defining it, that's a gift of the experience. What you walked into, as Robin Williams says in Good Will Hunting, is not your fault. It's not your fault.
Mhm.
But the way out of it is the only thing that we can control. And the way out is through.
Mm.
And if people understand that, we'd be able to have a lot more healing. But it's a wound. There may be a lifetime scar, but you're able to heal it with eventually. There can be healing when you're able to address anything in your life.
Totally. It's great. I feel like we actually got to what's the word I'm looking for? We got to
Expand.
promote. No, we got to promote a lot of basic philosophies, right? I think they don't teach like a lot of these basic philosophies in school, and just and how they apply to life, and how they're like simple guidelines, right? To
Mm,
really to get through a life that could be otherwise a struggle.
yeah.
Um, you know.
Well, so much of life is I'm going to take a projector screen and I'm going to put a bunch of books and experiences in my version of reality. And that's what I want you to see. And
Mm,
spirituality is like, fuck all those books. I'm just going to focus on the light, connect to that in the
mhm,
things that make sense. I'll view it. But I understand reality is this light. It's not the things blocking it. And so that takes away regurgitation and leans into the imagination,
mm,
and that's that whole shifted paradigm. We want to
mm.
just kind of like drill things in your head
Yes,
and get you to be separate. And spirituality is really about, letting go, letting God in a way.
I love
Um,
it. I love it. And Hat Pauser says, in Illusions, Richard Bach wrote, "You're always free to choose a different You're always free to choose a different future or a different past. I finally understood that when I read John Bradshaw's work years later." I love that. And I didn't read John Bradshaw's work, but what I'm imagining is again that has to do with perspective and kind of looking back at your story and reframing it, and
mm,
almost like you said, instead of becoming the victim, you make yourself the hero of the
mm,
story,
yeah.
right? Look at this. I went through this. Will, who is out there in the audience, William Conway, he went through some crazy stuff, and came through it, and was able to become that. It was his identity, the victor.
Mhm,
How he got through that stuff and became a victor.
yeah.
Which is awesome. I love this. I can't even believe that it's 10 o'clock already, because I haven't even opened up the floor to questions if anybody was curious about your experience or anything else. But as we're closing the show, I do want you to once again, I do have your URL at the bottom of the screen. I don't know if your podcast can be found there as well. So I do want you to just promote your podcast real quick
Mhm.
again, and maybe talk about what you talk about and who your guests are, some of your guests. Who's been your
Yeah.
favorite guest?
I love them all, but the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, we usually have authors and, people of all walks of life. But we've had people like, Neil Donald Walsh. We've had Alison Dubois, my colleague I mentioned. We've
Hmm.
had Suzanne Giesemann, who you may be familiar with. What's his name? Dr. Eben Alexander, Paul Selig, has been on
Wow,
the podcast. So, couple faces and
so
names,
great.
but it's always a fun time. The crazy part is when you are used to seeing these guys in libraries, and you turn on the webcam, you're like, holy shit, that's Neil Donald
Yeah,
Walsh right
I
in
love
front of
it.
me,
You
and
know,
your heart is just pounding. You're like, I don't know what to say. Like I'm talking, but you know what? After a while, it's funny. Like I mean, with Neil, he has such a good sense of humor. I'm like, "Hi, Neil," and then he imitated me. He goes, "Hi, Neil." I'm like, "Oh, God." He's very funny.
and it
And
made
then
you comfortable right away, right?
whatever I said, he's like, "I'm okay." He goes, "I'm okay." I'm like, "Oh, you're getting in my head, dude." And then I'm
That's
like, "All
so
right, I
great.
can't do this. I'm gonna shut it off." He goes, "Okay, bye, Jacob," and he shuts it off and leaves. And then he comes back, like very funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but that's what I needed. I needed like to be. He probably sensed I was a little kind of starstruck, and he's probably used to that. But yeah,
That's so great. Again, I love that's what's going on, right? That these conversations are
yeah,
happening. Not only are they happening, but people are tuning into them. I love this stuff. I'm a junkie. I watch Alex Ferrari. I watch Neil deGrasse Tyson. I watch all of these people, and it's what's even funnier is I was really into like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand, and I thought that they were great, and whatever, they're great people. But
mhm,
like once they started kind of leaning into the politics and some
yeah,
of those things, I felt like that wasn't what I was tuning in for.
yeah. It didn't
I was
resonate, but it's kind of
yeah
like a lobster. We just kind of like lose our shell and come into another one, and yeah, and I think it's just like there's a season of any relationship,
mhm,
and we
mhm.
get to a certain place, and then we are grateful for that and move to maybe something different and something else. But
Yes,
yeah, it seems like you're tuned into a lot of the right places with Alex, who also lived for a period of time in Queens, I believe, too. So
yeah,
uh,
he's got an interesting story
I
too.
think it's
Yeah.
from Cuba, if I'm not mistaken, but he, was living in Queens, and was very much involved in the film industry and crossed
Yeah.
elbows with a lot of high prolific people. Like I name dropped, what's his name, George Lucas, and he's like, "Man, I got to call up George Lucas right now." I was like, I was like
Nice.
pretty, as like, he like she tried to check me there. It was pretty cool. So
Yeah,
had
no,
a good time.
he's got an interesting story too about his
Yeah.
involvement with not the greatest people who are financing his movie and all of that.
Oh
But
yeah.
again, through these experiences, we become who we are,
Mhm.
and that's just so great. So um, again, Jacob, I love talking to you. I'm so grateful that we are still in the same sphere
Yeah.
and pushing out that same message, and we get to talk. I see a couple of quick questions here. Interesting. Um, did your Jewish faith help your spirituality or not?
Yeah, in the end, it really did. Growing up with it, it just had a value of seeking something,
Mhm.
bigger than, you know, what the material world.
Mhm.
And it certainly gave me a unique perspective to look at things in a broader lens. So certainly grateful for that. And
Mhm.
just in terms of ethics, treatment of others, service to others, kindness, are all hallmarks of religion. I mean, religion to me is sometimes I sometimes get it mixed up, but sometimes it's man in God's image instead of God's in man. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
well, I had my issues with organized religion,
hmm
but it wasn't with the basic philosophies of religion, right?
hmm
Because those basic philosophies of, do unto others as you would have them do
right.
unto you. I mean, come on, you can't argue with that stuff.
The the
You know
the
what I mean?
dogmatic human parts of it that
Yeah.
infiltrate the spirituality are a turnoff for a lot of people, which
Right.
lead itself into the continuity of control, which
Mhm.
influences finances, and there's a big dynamic of
Right.
control and financial control. Yeah, so that's a piece. But the spirituality found in all religion is the beautiful thing. You have to really go to the genesis of it, but there's a kernel of truth, I believe, in almost any faith that you travel on. It's
Absolutely.
just, you know, yeah.
Jacob, I'm gonna have to ask you to come back again because we didn't even get to talk about a lot of stuff. I mean, mysticism and all these other things, and even we didn't get as deep as I wanted into this. But you are so much fun to talk to. I appreciate you being here so much.
No, my pleasure. We climbed a couple of rungs and expanded our consciousness and got
Yeah, oh,
higher.
absolutely.
You know,
I got to go back and watch this episode and see what we talked about. Um, but before we go, do you have anything else that you'd like to say to the audience? Words of wisdom, words of love, anything to promote specifically? You're going to be anywhere coming up?
well, I think some people are very much obsessed with understanding God, and I think listening to near-death experience, you can know God. And
Mm,
once you know God, the bigger piece is the embodiment of God and thinking and acting like God, which is being
mm.
a bearer of love and support to another. And I think that's where the bigger piece is the intellectualization of God versus the embodiment. And I think if we're able to do that, we could have a lot more changes
I love
within
that.
this world. But obviously, if anyone wants to contact me, jacobelcooper.com. Have a couple events coming up, so stay posted on the website. I will be at the Omega Institute next year, the Edgar Casey Center, Virginia Beach, up
Awesome.
in May for the past. It's going to be the reincarnation conference that I'm going to be at, and things up the pipeline. So, always staying busy.
I love that, Jacob. Well, we'll definitely look out for you. You turned me on so much with what you just said. Think and be like God. That's just. I don't think I ever. I don't think I ever heard someone say that to me like the way
We
you just did.
we
I
see
love
we
it.
see God as outside of ourselves, and
I yeah.
that was the one thing that I got from Neil, where he was on the Matt Lauer show. And Matt asked him, Neil, what's God's biggest message to humanity?
Mhm.
And Neil, and he said to Neil, you have a couple of seconds to answer this. And Neil said, he looked in the camera, you got me all wrong. You
I
got me
love
all
that.
wrong.
I love that. I want to say thanks to everybody for being here. I see everybody thanking us for the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you just reminded me of a story I heard today, which also, again, sometimes you hear these things and you hear them all through your life, but then you'll hear them and there'll be a moment where like it'll just ring for you and it'll make sense. And the thing I heard was about Moses and the
Mm,
burning bush. And Moses was like, "Who should I tell them you are? I am that I am." And the idea, the way that was explained to me in what I was watching or the way I heard it was, the idea was that I am the idea that something can even be,
mhm.
right? That something is, I am that I am. And
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
one of the first channelers that we know of, when he went on Mount Sinai, after the Exodus, in Egypt. But yes, we
You're
call
the OG channeler.
we call him Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe. But yeah, Moses. Yeah, it's just one of our great spiritual beacons of the history on the planet. So
I love that.
yeah.
I love that. Ancient knowledge, people. Ancient knowledge. Look it up. Jacob, thank you so much. I think let me just see who I've got popping up on my calendar next week. Oh, we're doing the Grace Grella show next week, and I've got an interesting woman who contacted me, Carrie Marie Powell. You're going to learn all about her. She's an artist who works with crystals and sacred geometry and creates her art through messages. So you'll meet her next week. But thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Jacob. I will see everybody next week. Peace.
All right. Peace and love.